You know, life moves fast. One moment you're on top of the world and the next you're lost, wondering how everything slipped away. We live in a world that's loud, filled with opinions, notifications, judgments, fears, and yet the real battle, the one that defines who we are, is the one that happens in silence, inside our minds. The thoughts we choose to believe, the stories we tell ourselves, they don't just shape how we feel, they shape what we become. Today, I want to talk to you about that power, about how controlling your thoughts isn't about suppressing them, it's about guiding them. It's about taking back authorship of your own story. There are 5 truths I've learned about this, 5 shifts that can change your entire life if you practice them with patience and courage. You know, most of us spend our lives caught in a storm of thoughts we didn't even choose. They come and go like waves, some calm, some violent. But few of us ever stop long enough to ask, where did that come from? We just get pulled under. We live by default, reacting to every emotion, every doubt, every whisper of fear, without realizing that we have a choice. And that's where it all begins, with awareness. Awareness is the first step to taking back your life. See, you can't control what you don't notice. You can't fix what you can't name. Imagine driving a car with a fogged up windshield. You might move, but you're not really steering, you're guessing. That's how most of us move through life. Unclear, distracted, unaware of the silent engine that drives our behavior, our thoughts. Awareness is what clears the fog. It lets you finally see what's been there all along. The funny thing about awareness is that it's both simple and incredibly hard. It's not about meditating on a mountaintop or reading 100 self-help books. It's about catching yourself in real time. When the thought says you're not good enough, or they're better than you, or why even try? It's about pausing for half a second and saying, wait, is that true? Or is that just an old echo in my head? That single pause can change everything. It's a small gap, but inside that gap is freedom. Think about how much of our lives are driven by unconscious stories. Maybe as a kid, someone told you that you weren't smart or strong or lovable. You didn't choose that belief, but over time, it became part of your identity. You started looking for proof that it was true, failing a test, losing a relationship, missing an opportunity, and each event reinforced the story. Without awareness, you become trapped inside it, living in a loop that was written for you by someone else. But when you become aware, you realize you're not the story. You're the storyteller. There's a practice called metacognition, the ability to think about your own thoughts. It's something neuroscientists have studied for years. And they found that when people learn to observe their thoughts without judgment, their stress levels drop, their focus improves, and their overall happiness rises. It's as if awareness switches on the light in a dark room. The fear doesn't vanish, but now you can see it for what it is. Just a thought, not a truth. I remember hearing about a woman who struggled with anxiety for years. She said her mind felt like a broken radio, constant noise, no control. One day, during a moment of panic, she decided not to fight it. She sat still and just watched her thoughts. Instead of saying, I'm anxious, she said, I'm noticing anxiety. And something shifted. The storm didn't stop immediately, but she was no longer inside it. She was observing it. Over time, that awareness became her anchor. She didn't eliminate her anxiety, but she stopped letting it define her. That's the essence of awareness. It's not about perfection. It's about perception. It's about learning to see without judging, to watch your thoughts drift by like clouds instead of chasing each one like it's a storm you need to survive. Because the truth is, not every thought deserves your attention. Some are just noise. Some are memories replaying themselves, and some are invitations to grow, to heal, to move forward. When you live with awareness, you stop being a passenger and start being the driver again. You begin to notice the space between stimulus and response, the sacred space where your power lives. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived unthinkable suffering, once said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our growth. Awareness is that space. It's the breath before the reaction, the calm before the choice, the moment where you decide who you're going to be next. So start small. Notice the tone of your thoughts when you wake up. Notice the stories your mind tells you when something doesn't go your way. Notice when you're harsh on yourself and ask why. Awareness doesn't demand that you fix everything. It just asks that you see it. Because once you can see, you can choose. And once you can choose, you can change everything. You know, life has this way of testing us. Things don't always go as planned. Dreams fall apart, people leave, doors close, and sometimes it feels like the world is against you. But what if it's not? What if what's happening for you is far greater than what's happening to you? The difference between those two perspectives can change everything. That's the power of reframing. Learning to see the same situation through a different lens, to turn pain into purpose and setbacks into starting points. We can't always control what happens to us. Life's unpredictable. One day you're laughing with friends, the next you're staring at a ceiling at 3 a.m. wondering how it all fell apart. But here's the truth. What matters most isn't the event itself, it's the meaning you give to it. Because your brain is a storyteller. It's always trying to make sense of things. When something painful happens, the mind wants to label it bad, unfair, hopeless. But those labels aren't reality. They're just one interpretation. Reframing is about rewriting those labels so they work for you, not against you. Let's say you lose a job. Most people might think, I failed. I'm not good enough. That single thought can spiral into shame, fear, paralysis. But reframing asks a different question. What is this trying to teach me? What opportunity is hiding here? Maybe losing that job is the push you needed to start something new, something you wouldn't have dared to try otherwise. I've seen people reinvent themselves completely after losing everything. It wasn't luck that saved them. It was perspective. They chose to see possibility where others saw an ending. There's a story of a man who broke his leg right before a marathon he'd trained months for. He was devastated, angry at the world. But during his recovery, he started volunteering at a rehab center, helping others who'd suffered far worse injuries. That experience changed him. He said later that breaking his leg was the best thing that ever happened to him. It broke his body, but opened his heart. That's reframing in action. It's not denial, it's transformation. Psychologists call this cognitive reappraisal. Studies show that people who reframe stressful events are more resilient, experience less depression, and recover faster from trauma. Their brains literally adapt differently. They build new neural pathways that favor growth over despair. So when we talk about reframing, we're not talking about wishful thinking. We're talking about a real, measurable shift in how your brain perceives reality. But it takes practice. Because the mind loves comfort, even in misery. It clings to old stories, stories of blame, regret, and loss. It takes awareness and courage to stop and say, wait, what if I'm seeing this wrong? Sometimes reframing means admitting that the situation isn't the problem. It's your interpretation that hurts. Maybe that breakup wasn't rejection. It was redirection. Maybe that failure wasn't the end. It was the universe saying, not this door, try another. When you look at it that way, even pain becomes a teacher. I remember hearing about a woman who missed her flight by minutes and was furious. Later, she found out that the plane she was supposed to be on had serious mechanical trouble midair. She said that moment changed how she viewed inconvenience forever. What felt like bad luck was actually grace in disguise. You never really know what life is protecting you from when it doesn't go your way. Reframing is about choosing meaning with intention. It's about taking the pen back from fear and writing your story with faith. It's standing in the middle of the storm and saying, this may not make sense yet, but I trust there's a reason. That trust, call it hope, call it strength, call it spirit. It's what keeps you moving when logic says stop. The world doesn't change because you reframe it. You change. And when you change, everything around you begins to shift. The same streets, the same people, the same challenges. They all look different because you see them differently. And that's the secret. Reframing doesn't alter reality. It alters your relationship with it. And when that changes, life opens up in ways you never thought possible. There's something powerful about where we place our attention. The mind is like a lens. It magnifies whatever it's pointed at. If you focus on fear, fear grows. If you focus on hope, hope expands. The truth is, we become what we repeatedly pay attention to. Most people don't realize that. They wake up each morning, grab their phones, scroll through chaos, compare their lives to others, and wonder why they feel anxious or lost. But the mind is just following orders. It's showing you what you've asked it to, what you've been feeding it. The question is, what are you choosing to see? Every moment, life gives you a choice about what to focus on. The world has both beauty and pain, light and shadow. Both are real, but your experience depends on which side you decide to stare at. If you spend your time focusing on everything that's wrong, you'll always feel powerless. If you train your focus toward what you can control, your actions, your growth, your gratitude, you find strength where others see struggle. Science actually supports this. There's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. Its job is to filter information. Out of millions of things happening around you, it only highlights what it thinks you care about. That's why when you're thinking about buying a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere. They were always there. You just weren't tuned to notice. The same thing happens with your goals, your fears, your beliefs. If you tell your brain, I'm unlucky, nothing works out for me, it'll start collecting proof of that story. But if you say, I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm finding a way, it'll filter your world to match that too. Your focus becomes your reality. There's a story about a man who kept failing in business. Every project he touched collapsed. He started believing he just wasn't cut out for success. One day, his mentor told him, stop focusing on what you lost. Focus on what you learned. That shift changed everything. Instead of looking at failure as proof he wasn't enough, he began to see it as training. He started to notice patterns where he could improve what worked, what didn't. A year later, he built something that lasted. The difference wasn't luck. It was focus. What you focus on is like the fuel you give your soul. Feed it with resentment and you'll burn out. Feed it with purpose and you'll rise. That's why gratitude is so powerful. It redirects the spotlight. Even in hard times, there's always something worth acknowledging. The friend who checked in, the meal on your table, the breath in your lungs. Gratitude doesn't erase pain, but it gives you perspective. It reminds you that even in darkness, there's still light. The world will constantly try to pull your attention away, to make you look at what's broken, what's missing, what's wrong. But focus is a discipline. It's something you build through practice. It's saying, yes, this hurts, but I choose to look at what I can do. It's waking up and setting your intention before the world sets it for you. Even a small habit, like starting your day without your phone, taking a quiet moment to breathe, or writing down one thing you're grateful for, it reclaims your focus. And with that, you reclaim your peace. There's a saying, where your attention goes, your energy flows. If you focus on problems, you'll feel stuck. If you focus on possibilities, you'll move. The mind will follow your gaze. And once you understand that, you stop being a victim of your thoughts and start being their director. You start shaping your own experience instead of letting the noise of the world shape it for you. Every great change begins with focus. Focus on who you want to become, not who you were. Focus on what you can build, not what's been broken. Life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing where to place your eyes when it arrives. If you can direct your focus toward growth, gratitude, and purpose, then even the hardest days become part of something meaningful. You can't always control what happens, but you can always control what you give your attention to. And that, right there, is where true power begins. Most people understand that what we eat shapes our bodies, but few realize that what we feed our minds shapes our lives. Every thought, every conversation, every story we let in, it all becomes part of who we are. Just like the body can't thrive on junk food, the mind can't grow on negativity, fear, or chaos. Yet that's what so many of us consume daily. We scroll through endless streams of comparison, outrage, and distraction, and then wonder why we feel drained, unfocused, or hopeless. The truth is simple. Your mind is what you feed it. Think about it. If you start your morning by reading bad news, arguing online, or diving into other people's drama, you're already programming your mind to expect conflict, to look for what's wrong. But if you start with something that inspires you, something that fills you with gratitude or purpose, it changes the entire tone of your day. Your energy follows your attention. The content you consume isn't just information, it's nutrition for your spirit. There was once a teacher who told his students, your mind is a garden, your thoughts are seeds. You can grow flowers or you can grow weeds. That's not just a nice metaphor, it's reality. Every piece of media you watch, every person you spend time with, every word you tell yourself, it all plants something inside you. Over time, those seeds take root. So if you're constantly surrounding yourself with doubt and negativity, don't be surprised when that's what grows. But if you choose to fill your mind with courage, hope, and knowledge, you'll start to see those qualities bloom in your life. We live in an age of information overload. The problem isn't that we lack knowledge, it's that we're drowning in noise. The human brain wasn't designed to process the constant stream of opinions, advertisements, and emotions that flood our screens every day. It's no wonder anxiety is rising and attention spans are shrinking. We're mentally malnourished, not because we don't have enough to think about, but because we're consuming too much of what doesn't matter. Feeding your mind well means learning to filter, to choose quality over quantity, silence over noise, substance over distraction. One way to start is by being intentional about what you allow in. Read books that challenge you to think deeply, not just content that keeps you entertained. Listen to music or podcasts that uplift you, not ones that feed your anger or insecurity. Surround yourself with people who inspire you to become better, not because they're perfect, but because they push you toward growth. The people we spend time with are like meals for the soul. Some nourish, some deplete. Choose carefully. I once heard a story about an athlete who was struggling with confidence. He trained hard but couldn't break through mentally. His coach told him, "You're training your body every day, but what are you training your mind with?" The athlete realized he'd been replaying every failure in his head like a highlight reel. So he changed his routine. Every morning, he spent 10 minutes visualizing success, repeating affirmations of strength and belief. Within months, his performance transformed. Not because his muscles changed, but because his mindset did. What you feed your mind becomes your default. Feeding your mind also means protecting it. You wouldn't leave your fridge open for anyone to throw junk into. Yet we do that with our minds all the time. Every time you say yes to gossip, endless negativity, or self-criticism, you're letting toxins in. Protect your mental diet like your peace depends on it, because it does. There's a quiet power in choosing not to engage, in turning off the noise and giving your mind space to breathe. And don't forget that rest is nourishment too. Stillness is food for the soul. When you disconnect from the world for a while, take a walk, sit in silence, breathe, you give your mind time to digest everything it's taken in. Just like the body needs time to process what we eat, the mind needs moments of quiet to make sense of what we've experienced. In that stillness, new ideas grow, wisdom forms, peace returns. What you feed your mind today will shape who you become tomorrow. So be deliberate, be gentle, be wise. Every choice is a bite, every thought a flavor. Feed yourself hope, feed yourself gratitude, feed yourself vision. Because when the mind is well nourished, life itself starts to taste different, richer, calmer, and infinitely more alive. It's one thing to think differently, but it's another to live differently. Thoughts have power, but only when they move from your mind into motion. Too many people wait for the perfect moment, when they feel ready, confident, or certain. But life doesn't wait. The truth is, you won't always feel brave before you take a step. You won't always feel strong before you make a change. The courage comes in the act itself. You don't need to believe fully before you begin. You just need to begin, and the belief will follow. Every great transformation starts as a whisper, a better thought quietly asking to be acted on. Maybe it's the idea to start something new, to speak up, to forgive, to walk away from what no longer serves you. Those thoughts are like sparks, but sparks fade if you don't give them air. When you act on them, you breathe life into possibility. You turn an invisible idea into a real moment. That's how change happens. Not in the thinking, but in the doing. Think of it like this. The mind is a blueprint, but the body builds the house. You can plan forever, visualize forever, dream forever. But until you pick up the hammer, nothing gets built. Sometimes we get stuck in analysis, replaying scenarios in our heads until we talk ourselves out of the very thing that could change everything. Fear steps in, whispering, "What if you fail?" But there's another question that matters more. What if you never try? Acting on better thoughts is about choosing to trust the direction of growth over the comfort of standing still. There's a story of a man who wanted to learn the guitar. For years, he kept saying he would, when life slowed down, when he had time. 10 years passed, and he still hadn't touched a string. One day, his friend told him, "If you'd started when you first thought about it, you'd be a master by now." That moment hit him hard. So he picked up a guitar the next day, and though it was slow and awkward at first, he kept playing. Within months, his energy shifted. He felt alive again. The lesson is simple. Time will pass anyway. The only question is whether you'll use it to move toward the life you imagine or stay dreaming about it. Acting on better thoughts doesn't mean every decision will be perfect. Some will fail, some will hurt, but every action teaches you something that thinking never could. Action gives clarity. You can't steer a parked car. Once you start moving, even slowly, the path reveals itself, and often, the things you fear most lose their power once you face them. Courage doesn't mean you're unafraid. It means you do it anyway, even with your heart racing and your hands shaking. Psychologists talk about something called behavioral activation. It's the idea that your actions can shift your emotions, not the other way around. When you take small, intentional steps, your brain releases chemicals that boost confidence and motivation. It's a feedback loop. The more you act, the better you feel, and the better you feel, the more you act. So don't wait for motivation to show up. Move first. Let the momentum create the feeling. There's also something sacred about keeping promises to yourself. When you act on a better thought, no matter how small, you tell your subconscious, "I can trust myself." That trust builds strength. It creates a quiet inner confidence that no one can take away. Each small action, a morning walk, a phone call, a new habit, becomes a vote for the person you want to become. And eventually, those votes add up to identity. You don't wake up one day transformed. You grow into it, one decision at a time. We often think our lives are shaped by big moments, but more often, it's the small, consistent actions that define us. The quiet choices made when no one's watching. The moments you choose growth over comfort, love over fear, effort over doubt. Those moments build a life. The thoughts that guide you may be invisible, but the actions you take become your story. So when that better thought comes, when it whispers, try again or take the leap, don't push it aside. Don't wait for perfect timing or flawless confidence. Take one small step in its direction, because the universe responds to movement. And once you move, the world starts to move with you. Thoughts create potential, but action creates reality. And every time you act on a better thought, you bring that reality a little closer to life. Controlling your thoughts isn't about forcing positivity or pretending everything's okay. It's about building a relationship with your mind, one based on awareness, kindness, and direction. Remember, you are not your thoughts. You are the observer, and the observer always has the power to choose. So today, choose thoughts that serve you. Choose focus over fear. Choose growth over comfort. Because once you master your mind, you don't just change your thoughts, you change your life.